My name is Catherine, I'm 29, and yesterday my father screamed, "Get out," after I confronted him with financial documents proving he'd been stealing millions from our family business. What he didn't know was that my supposedly dead grandfather had been watching us all along. This morning, a lawyer handed me keys to a $45 million Florida villa and control of our company. 24 hours ago, I was homeless. Today, I own an empire built by the grandfather they told me was dead. Asterisk, I still remember the shock on my father's face when I showed him those documents. If you've ever experienced family betrayal, you know that feeling when everything you believed comes crashing down. Where are you watching from today? If my story of family deception and sweet justice resonates with you, please hit subscribe so you never miss how this all unfolds. Trust me, what my father did next makes his initial reaction look tame by comparison. Growing up in Chicago, I never questioned our seemingly normal middle-class life. We lived in a modest 4-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but comfortable enough. My father, Richard, worked long hours at Williams Construction, the company he claimed to have built from scratch. My mother, Margaret, kept herself busy with charity committees and garden clubs. My younger brother, Jason, was the golden child, following in Dad's footsteps and joining the family business straight out of college. We were the picture-perfect American family. Or so I thought. The first crack in that perfect image appeared when I was 12. I was helping my mother clean out some old boxes in the attic when I found a faded photograph tucked between the pages of an old book. It showed a distinguished older man with his arm around my father, both smiling broadly in front of a massive oceanfront property. The man had the same distinctive green eyes that I'd inherited. "Who's this with, Dad?" I asked innocently, holding up the photo. My mother's face went pale. She snatched the picture from my hands and quickly tucked it into her pocket. "That's nobody important. Just an old business associate." But something about her reaction felt off. Later that night, I overheard my parents arguing in hushed tones. "She found the photo, Richard. What if she starts asking questions? Then we tell her what we've always said. That her grandfather died when she was a baby. End of story." "Grandfather?" I pressed my ear closer to the door. "Your father made his choice," my mother hissed. "He chose his precious company over his family. Catherine doesn't need to know anything different." I backed away from the door, confused and hurt. Why would they lie about my grandfather? Why pretend he was dead if he wasn't? The next morning at breakfast, I casually asked about my grandfather, watching their reactions carefully. "He died before you could remember him, sweetheart," my father said smoothly, not even looking up from his newspaper. "Car accident. It was very tragic." "Was that his beach house in the photo I found?" My father's newspaper lowered just enough for his eyes to meet mine. "What photo?" "The one Mom took from me yesterday." A look passed between my parents, so quick I almost missed it. "Oh, that old thing," my mother laughed, but it sounded forced. "No, that wasn't a beach house. Just a hotel where your father had a business conference once. The man was just a colleague." I nodded, pretending to believe them. But from that day forward, I started paying closer attention to the inconsistencies in their stories, the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room, the mysterious phone calls my father would take in his study with the door locked. As I grew older, I developed an interest in finance and business, much to my father's dismay. He wanted me to study something more suitable for a young lady, like education or nursing. But I was stubborn, another trait I apparently inherited from my mysterious grandfather. I majored in business with a minor in accounting, and after graduation, I took a job at a prestigious financial firm instead of joining Williams Construction like my father had planned. "The family business isn't good enough for you," he'd asked bitterly on graduation day. "I want to make my own way," I'd replied, not telling him the real reason. I wanted to understand money. How it moved, how it could be hidden. Because somewhere deep inside, I knew our family had secrets wrapped in dollar signs. At my financial firm, I specialized in forensic accounting. Learning how to trace money through complex systems, how to spot irregularities and fraud. Each new skill I acquired felt like another tool in an arsenal I didn't yet know I would need. On my 29th birthday, my family threw me a small dinner party. As my father raised his glass for a toast, his words struck me as odd. "To Catherine," he said, his eyes never quite meeting mine. "May she always remember that family comes first, and that some secrets are kept for a reason." The way he emphasized secrets sent a chill down my spine. Later that night, while everyone was distracted by dessert, I slipped away to my father's study. I'd noticed him locking a new set of documents in his desk drawer earlier that day. Something about his furtive movements had triggered my professional suspicions. Using the spare key I'd found years ago, I opened the drawer and discovered several letters addressed to my father from a law firm in Miami. Skimming quickly, I saw references to the trust, annual distributions, and Thomas Williams stipulations. Thomas Williams. A name I'd never heard spoken, but that matched the initials on the back of that old photograph, TW. Heart pounding. I took photos of the documents with my phone and relocked the drawer. Back at my apartment, I studied them more carefully. The letters suggested that my father was receiving regular payments from a trust established by Thomas Williams, my grandfather. The same grandfather they claimed had died before I could remember him. Over the next few weeks, I dug deeper. I requested time off work and told my family I was going on vacation with friends. Instead, I stayed in my apartment, creating a timeline of my father's business trips over the past several years. A pattern emerged. He traveled to Miami at least 3 times a year, always alone, always returning with some expensive gift for my mother. In the Chicago Public Records Office, I found another shocking document, a death certificate for Thomas Williams dated 20 years earlier. But the letterhead on those Miami law firm documents was current. Someone was lying, and I was determined to find out who. With my background in forensic accounting, I knew exactly how to proceed with my investigation. I needed access to the Williams Construction financial records, but my father had always been careful to keep me away from the company books. My brother Jason worked as the CFO, handling all financial matters under our father's supervision. But Jason had one weakness that I could exploit, his laziness when it came to cybersecurity. At the next family Sunday dinner, I made sure to arrive early. While helping my mother in the kitchen, I casually mentioned that I was thinking about finally joining the family business. "Your father would be thrilled," she said, though something in her eyes seemed uncertain. I was thinking I could help Jason with the financial side. He's always complaining about being overworked. My mother's hands stilled on the cutting board. "I'm not sure that's a good idea, Catherine. Your father and Jason have their system." "Their system? It's a family business, Mom. Shouldn't the whole family be involved?" She didn't answer, just continued chopping vegetables with more force than necessary. When Jason arrived, I waited until he'd had a couple of drinks before bringing up work. "How's the quarterly audit going?" "Must be a nightmare," he groaned. "Don't remind me. I'm drowning in spreadsheets." "You know, I could help with that. It's literally what I do for a living." Jason laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Trust me, sis, you don't want to get involved in all that boring stuff. Maybe I could just take a look? Give you a second pair of eyes?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "I guess it couldn't hurt. I'll email you some files tomorrow." The next day, Jason sent me several financial reports, sanitized versions, I was sure, but they gave me enough information to start piecing things together. Using the login credentials he'd unwittingly provided, he'd sent the files directly from his work email, which included his signature with his employee ID number. People really don't think about these things. I was able to access the company's cloud storage. What I found shocked me to my core. Williams Construction had been hemorrhaging money for years, but not because business was bad. The company was actually thriving with major contracts across the Midwest. The problem was that large sums were being regularly diverted to offshore accounts. The paper trail led back to one person, my father. But that wasn't all. I discovered a separate set of accounts labeled TW Trust. These showed regular deposits into the company from an external source, followed by immediate withdrawals to my father's personal accounts. He was embezzling money from a trust that appeared to be set up by my grandfather, the same grandfather they'd told me was dead. Further digging revealed that the trust had originally been established with specific provisions. The bulk of the assets were to be transferred to me on my 30th birthday. with smaller annual distributions to support the family business in the meantime. My father had been stealing my inheritance for years. I needed to confirm my suspicions before confronting my father. One afternoon, when I knew he would be in meetings, I visited my mother for coffee. After some small talk, I gently brought up the past. "Mom, I've been thinking about family lately. I wish I had known Grandfather Thomas." The cup she was holding clattered against its saucer. "Who have you been talking to?" "No one. I just found some old papers mentioning him." "What papers?" Her voice had taken on a shrill quality I'd never heard before. "Just some old company documents." "Mom, is Grandfather Thomas really dead?" Her face crumpled, and to my shock, she began to cry. After nearly 30 years of practiced composure, my mother was breaking down in front of me. "Your grandfather is not a good man, Catherine," she said between sobs. "He tried to control everyone. When your father wanted to modernize the business, Thomas refused. They fought bitterly. Eventually, Thomas threatened to disinherit your father, to leave everything to you directly, even though you were just a child." "So what happened?" "Your father found a way to persuade Thomas to step aside." "Legal maneuvers." "Nothing illegal." She didn't sound convinced of that herself. "Thomas was so angry he moved away. Cut all ties with us. Said he never wanted to see your father again." "But he's alive?" She nodded reluctantly. "Last we heard, he was living in Florida." "But Catherine, you must not pursue this. Your father would. He would destroy everything if he knew you were asking questions." Her warning only strengthened my resolve. I thanked her for her honesty, promised not to upset my father, and left with my mind racing. My next stop was the office of Gregory Palmer, a junior partner at my father's firm who had always seemed uncomfortable around my family. I'd noticed how he avoided eye contact at company events, how he would find excuses to leave whenever my father entered the room. Over drinks at a bar far from the office, and with assurances of confidentiality, Gregory confirmed my worst suspicions. "Your father has been creating fake invoices for years," he confided, voice barely above a whisper. "Billing for materials never purchased, labor never performed." I've wanted to say something, but he trailed off. "But he's the boss," I finished for him. Gregory nodded miserably. "There's more. Your brother Jason knows everything. He's been helping cover the tracks, making the books look clean for the annual audits." My own brother. The betrayal stung worse than I'd expected. Armed with this knowledge, I spent the next week gathering and copying every incriminating document I could find. I set up a secure email account and sent everything to myself as a backup. I also contacted the Miami law firm, posing as my father's assistant, requesting confirmation of the next meeting date. The receptionist helpfully informed me that Mr. Richard Williams was expected the following month for his regular meeting regarding the Thomas Williams Trust. Everything was falling into place. I had the evidence. I knew the truth. Now I just needed to confront my father. I chose a Friday evening for the confrontation. My father always had a scotch after work on Fridays, mellowing his mood before dinner. I arrived at my parents' house with a manila envelope containing copies of the most damning evidence: bank transfers, falsified invoices, emails between my father and Jason discussing how to hide money from prying eyes. My mother seemed surprised to see me. "Catherine, we weren't expecting you tonight." "I thought I'd surprise everyone," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is Dad home?" "In his study. But he's tired. Maybe call before coming over next time." I ignored her suggestion and headed straight for my father's sanctuary. He looked up from his computer, annoyed at the interruption until he recognized me. "Catherine, what brings you here?" He didn't stand or offer a hug, just watched me warily. "I thought we could talk about the family business." I sat down without being invited, setting my envelope on the edge of his desk. His eyes flickered to it. "What's that?" "Some documents I thought you might want to explain." He laughed, but I could see tension in his shoulders. "I don't need to explain business matters to you. You chose not to join the company, remember?" "I think you'll want to explain these," I said, sliding the envelope toward him. He opened it slowly, his expression changing from annoyance to shock to something darker as he flipped through the pages. When he looked up, his eyes were cold. Where did you get these? Does it matter? They're real, aren't they? He slammed the papers down. This is none of your business, Catherine. You have no idea what you're getting involved in. I think embezzlement and fraud are very much my business when it's my inheritance being stolen. The color drained from his face. What are you talking about? Grandfather Thomas. The trust he set up for me. The one you've been systematically draining for years while telling me he was dead. My father stood up so quickly his chair crashed against the wall behind him. Who have you been talking to? That old man is dead to this family. But not actually dead, is he? Just living in Florida while you steal from both of us. He was around the desk in an instant, looming over me. You entitled little brat. You have no idea what I've sacrificed for this family, what I've built. You haven't built anything. I was standing now too, shouting back at him. You stole a company from your own father, then used it as your personal piggy bank. The study door opened and my mother and Jason appeared, drawn by the shouting. What's going on? My mother asked, though her frightened expression suggested she already knew. Our daughter seems to think she's some kind of detective, my father spat. She's been digging through company records, talking to people behind my back. Jason stepped forward, glancing at the papers scattered across the desk. Recognition dawned on his face. What have you done, Catherine? Me? What have I done? I turned on him, fury making my voice shake. I've uncovered the truth that you've been helping him hide. You're stealing from our own grandfather from me. It's not stealing, Jason said, but he couldn't meet my eyes. Dad earned that money. He built this company into what it is today. By committing fraud. By falsifying invoices and embezzling from client accounts. That's enough. My father slammed his fist on the desk. You don't know what you're talking about. Your grandfather was going to destroy everything I'd worked for, leave me with nothing while handing you the keys to the kingdom just because you reminded him of your grandmother. So that was it. Jealousy. My father couldn't stand that his own father might favor me over him. He was right not to trust you, I said quietly. Look what you've done with what he did give you. My father's face contorted with rage. Get out, he hissed. Richard, my mother started, but he cut her off. No, Margaret. She's made her choice. She's chosen a man who abandoned this family over her own father. He turned back to me, pointing toward the door. Get out of my house. You're no longer my daughter. I looked to my mother, hoping for some support, but she just stood there, tears streaming down her face, saying nothing. Jason moved to stand beside my father, a united front against me. Fine, I said, gathering the scattered papers. But this isn't over. You can't hide from what you've done. Get out, my father roared, his face purple with rage. I walked out of the study with as much dignity as I could muster, though my legs felt like they might give way beneath me. I went upstairs to my old bedroom and packed a small bag with the few belongings I still kept there. When I came back downstairs, the three of them were waiting in the foyer. Leave your key, my father said coldly. I dropped my childhood house key on the table without a word and walked out the door, feeling their eyes on my back. I didn't look back, didn't let them see me cry. I checked into a hotel that night, curled up on an impersonal bed, and finally let the tears come. I'd lost my entire family in one night. I'd never felt so alone. What I didn't know then was that I wasn't alone at all. I was being watched, protected, prepared for what would come next. The next morning, my phone rang at precisely 9 o'clock. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar Miami number. Hello. I answered, my voice still rough from crying. Is this Catherine Williams? A professional male voice inquired. Yes, it is. My name is Daniel Hoffman with Hoffman, Black, and Associates in Miami. I'm calling regarding the estate of Thomas Williams. Would you be available to meet today? My heart skipped a beat. Thomas Williams is my grandfather. Has something happened to him? There was a slight pause. I think it would be best if we discuss this in person. I can be in Chicago by this afternoon. Would 3 o'clock at the Four Seasons suit you? Yes, that's fine, I said automatically, my mind racing. But please, can you tell me if my grandfather is okay? Another pause. I'm sorry to inform you that Mr. Williams passed away 3 weeks ago. I'm handling the execution of his will. The world seemed to tilt around me. My grandfather, a man I'd never even met, A man I'd been told was long dead had actually been alive all these years, only to die just as I was discovering the truth about him. The cruelty of the timing felt like another betrayal. Miss Williams? Are you still there? Yes, I managed. I'll see you at 3. I spent the hours before the meeting in a daze, trying to process everything. My grandfather was real. He had been alive. And now he was truly gone, taking with him any chance I had of knowing him, of asking him why he'd stayed away, why he'd allowed my father to lie to me my entire life. At precisely 3 o'clock, I sat in a private meeting room at the Four Seasons, anxiously awaiting Daniel Hoffman. When he entered, I was struck by how young he was, probably mid-30s. With kind eyes behind stylish glasses. Miss Williams, thank you for meeting me on such short notice. He set a sleek leather briefcase on the table. I'm sorry about the circumstances. I appreciate that, but to be honest, Mr. Hoffman, I never even met my grandfather. My family told me he died when I was a baby. Something like anger flashed across his face before his professional mask returned. Yes, well, your grandfather anticipated that might be the case. That's why he recorded this for you. He opened his laptop and turned it to face me. On the screen was the face of an elderly man with familiar green eyes, my eyes. It was the same man from the photograph I'd found as a child, only 20 years older. My heart caught in my throat. Hello, Catherine. The recording began, the old man's voice strong despite his age. If you're watching this, then I'm gone. And Daniel is executing my final wishes. I'm sorry we never got to meet properly, though I've been keeping tabs on you your whole life. I gasped softly as he continued. Your father and I had a disagreement when you were very young. He wanted control of the company I built, and when I refused to step aside, he found ways to force my hand. Legal maneuvers that, while technically lawful, were morally bankrupt. Rather than fight him and subject the family to scandal, I chose to leave. It was the greatest regret of my life. Tears welled in my eyes as my grandfather's recorded image leaned closer to the camera. But I never stopped watching over you, Catherine. I saw your graduation from Northwestern. I was there. In the back. I saw you accept your job at Parker Financial. I've followed your career with great pride. You have your grandmother's intelligence and my stubbornness. He chuckled warmly. When your father forced me out, I took my personal fortune and built something new here in Florida. I wanted to leave it all to you. The grandchild who never got to know me because of your father's greed. Daniel will explain everything, but know this. I chose you as my heir not just because you're my blood, but because I've seen your character, your integrity, your brilliance. I'm proud of you, Catherine. I only wish we could have known each other. The video ended, and I found myself staring at a black screen, tears streaming down my face. Daniel tactfully handed me a tissue and waited for me to compose myself. Your grandfather was an extraordinary man, he said softly. I was privileged to work with him these past 10 years. What happened to him? I asked, dabbing at my eyes. Heart failure. It was peaceful, according to his doctors. Daniel opened his briefcase and removed several folders. Now, as to his estate. Mr. Williams left everything to you, Catherine. Everything. What does everything entail exactly? Daniel smiled. His primary residence, a villa in Palm Beach valued at approximately $45 million. An investment portfolio worth approximately $63 million. And most significantly, controlling shares in Williams Construction that he secretly maintained through a series of shell companies. I blinked, trying to process the figures. I'm sorry. Did you say $45 million? For the house alone. Yes. Your grandfather did quite well for himself after leaving Chicago. He slid a photograph across the table. The image showed a stunning Mediterranean-style mansion overlooking the ocean, with meticulously landscaped grounds and what appeared to be a private beach. This is mine now? I whispered. Yes. Along with the staff that maintains it. They're expecting you whenever you're ready to take residence. He passed me a set of keys. There are, however, some conditions to your inheritance. Of course there were. There was always a catch. What conditions? Your grandfather stipulated that you must take control of Williams Construction. Use the shares he left you to remove your father from power and assume leadership of the company. Daniel's expression was serious. He was very specific about this. It was important to him that the company he built be returned to someone who would run it with integrity. Asterisk, I wonder if you've ever had that moment where your entire life changes in an instant. Where you discover that everything you thought you knew about your family was based on lies. As I sat across from this lawyer being told I was now worth over $100 million, I couldn't help but think about all the years lost with my grandfather. If you're finding yourself invested in what happens next, please subscribe. Many of you have probably experienced family betrayal too, maybe not on this scale, but the pain is the same. I'd love to know if you've ever discovered a family secret that changed everything. Asterisk. Daniel continued, pulling out more documents. There's more. Your grandfather had private investigators monitoring your family for years. He has extensive records of your father's fraudulent activities. That actually doesn't surprise me, I said, thinking of my own recent investigation. I've discovered quite a bit myself. Daniel looked impressed. Your grandfather anticipated that too. He said you had a mind for details, like him. He handed me a USB drive. This contains everything his investigators uncovered. It's more than enough to pursue criminal charges, should you choose to. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders. This wasn't just about money or a luxurious house. This was about justice, about honoring a grandfather I never got to know. When did he decide to make me his heir? I asked. It was always his intention, from the moment he left Chicago. But he made it official after attending your business school graduation. He was impressed by your academic achievements and how you chose to make your own way rather than rely on family connections. I remembered my graduation day clearly, scanning the audience for my parents' faces, never imagining that my unknown grandfather was watching from the crowd, evaluating me, making decisions about my future. There's one more thing, Daniel said, reaching into his briefcase one last time. He pulled out a small jewelry box. Your grandfather wanted you to have this. It belonged to your grandmother. Inside was a stunning emerald pendant on a delicate gold chain. The deep green stone matched our eyes. He said it should be worn by the true heir to the Williams legacy, Daniel explained quietly. I closed my fingers around the pendant, feeling a connection to my family's past that had been denied to me for so long. In that moment, I made my decision. When can I see the house? Daniel smiled. I have a private jet waiting at O'Hare. We can leave whenever you're ready. I thought about my hotel room, the few possessions I had with me after being thrown out of my childhood home. I don't have much to pack. I can go now. Excellent. Your new life awaits in Florida, Miss Williams. As we left the hotel, I couldn't help but look back at the Chicago skyline. The only home I'd ever known. But instead of sadness, I felt a strange sense of liberation. For the first time in my life, I was free of my father's influence. Free to forge my own path with resources I never could have imagined. And I knew exactly what I was going to do with them. The private jet touched down in West Palm Beach as the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. A sleek black car was waiting on the tarmac to take us directly to the estate. As we drove through the ornate gates of 1420 Ocean Boulevard, I gasped involuntarily. The photos hadn't done it justice. The villa was a masterpiece of Mediterranean architecture, with terracotta roof tiles, arched windows, and cream-colored stucco walls covered in flowering vines. Palm trees lined the circular driveway, and in the fading light, I could see the ocean glittering beyond the manicured gardens. Welcome home, Miss Williams, the driver said as he opened my door. The front entrance was flanked by massive carved wooden doors that opened to reveal a small group of staff waiting in the marble-floored foyer. An elegant older woman stepped forward. Miss Catherine, welcome. I'm Mrs. Reynolds, the estate manager. We've been expecting you for quite some time. You have? I asked, surprised. Oh, yes. Your grandfather told us years ago that you would come to take your rightful place here someday. She smiled warmly. He spoke of you often. That night was a blur of introductions and tours. The house had 8 bedrooms, 11 bathrooms, a library, a home theater, a wine cellar, an indoor and outdoor pool, a private beach access, and grounds that seemed to go on forever. My room, apparently decorated specifically for me years earlier, overlooked the ocean and featured a king-sized four-poster bed, a sitting area, and a bathroom larger than my entire Chicago apartment. "Your grandfather updated this room regularly," Mrs. Reynolds explained, opening the walk-in closet to reveal a selection of designer clothes in exactly my size. "He wanted it to be perfect for when you arrived." I ran my fingers over the spines of books on the bedside table, business texts and mystery novels, my two favorite genres. A photograph on the dresser caught my eye, me at my college graduation, taken from a distance. He really had been there. "Did my grandfather live here alone?" I asked, trying to picture the old man wandering these massive halls by himself. "Mostly yes. He had friends visit occasionally, and the staff, of course. But he was a private man, especially in his later years." Mrs. Reynolds hesitated. "He did keep a study where he spent most of his time. He left instructions that you should see it when you arrived." She led me to a room on the second floor, unlocking it with a key she then handed to me. "I'll leave you to explore in private. Dinner will be ready whenever you'd like it." The study was smaller than I expected, warm and intimate compared to the grandeur of the rest of the house. A large desk dominated the space, facing windows that would frame the ocean during daylight hours. Bookshelves lined the walls, and a comfortable leather sofa sat before a fireplace that seemed unnecessary in Florida but added to the room's cozy atmosphere. What immediately drew my attention, however, were the files. One entire wall was covered with neatly labeled folders. As I approached, I realized they were organized by person: Richard Williams, Jason Williams, Margaret Williams, and finally, Catherine Williams. My folder was the thickest. With trembling hands, I took it down and opened it on the desk. Inside were meticulous records of my life, report cards, newspaper clippings of academic awards, copies of my college application essays, performance reviews from my job, even receipts from restaurants I'd frequented. It was simultaneously touching and unsettling to see my life documented so thoroughly by someone I'd never met. But it was the photographs that truly affected me. My grandfather had cataloged so many moments: me blowing out candles on my 16th birthday, walking across the stage at graduation, receiving an award at work. In one particularly poignant image, I was sitting alone in a park reading a book, completely unaware of being photographed. On the back, in spidery handwriting, "Catherine, age 23. She has Eliza's concentration when she reads." Eliza, my grandmother, whose emerald pendant now hung around my neck. I spent hours going through the files, learning about my family through my grandfather's meticulous observations. My father's file contained damning evidence of his business practices, including documentation of the legal maneuvers he'd used to force my grandfather out of the company. Jason's file was thinner, but showed his gradual corruption under our father's influence. My mother's file was perhaps the saddest, tracking her transformation from a vibrant, independent woman to a passive enabler of my father's schemes. Around midnight, I found a leather-bound journal in the desk drawer, labeled simply "For Catherine." It contained my grandfather's personal thoughts about the family situation, written as letters to me that he never sent. The first entry was dated shortly after he left Chicago. "My dearest Catherine, today I had to leave behind everything I built, but most painfully, I had to leave you. Your father has given me an impossible choice. Walk away or watch him destroy the company through a legal battle that would leave nothing for anyone. I choose to go so that someday, you might have something to inherit. I promise I will find a way to make this right." The entries continued through the years, documenting his efforts to rebuild his fortune, his pride in my accomplishments from afar, his strategies for maintaining secret control of shares in Williams Construction. The final entry was dated just a month before his death. "Catherine, I feel my time growing short. The doctors say my heart is failing, but I've held on to ensure everything is in place for you. Daniel knows what to do. The company will be yours to lead with integrity, as it always should have been. I only hope you can forgive an old man for watching from the shadows instead of being brave enough to reach out to you directly. I feared your father's reaction. What he might do to you if he knew we were in contact. Perhaps that was a coward's excuse. Whatever you decide to do with your inheritance, know that I am prouder of you than words can express. All my love, your grandfather. I closed the journal, tears streaming down my face. He had loved me from afar all these years, protecting me the only way he knew how. I outlined my plan to take control of Williams Construction. I need to understand exactly what shares my grandfather controlled and how quickly we can assert my authority, I explained. Daniel spread out documents on the table between us. Your grandfather maintained 51% of the voting shares through a complex structure of shell companies. Your father believes he controls the company, but in reality, he's been operating at your grandfather's pleasure all these years. And now at mine, I said, the weight of that power settling on me. Exactly. We can call for an emergency board meeting as soon as you're ready. With the evidence of financial impropriety. We can not only remove your father from his position, but potentially pursue criminal charges. I nodded, thinking of the forensic accounting evidence I'd gathered myself, now supplemented by my grandfather's extensive files. I want to move quickly, before he has a chance to hide assets or destroy evidence. Understood. There's one more thing you should know. Daniel hesitated. Your father has been making moves to sell the company to cover personal debts. Your grandfather's investigators discovered he has a significant gambling problem that he's kept hidden from the family. He's been using company funds to cover losses for years. That explained the missing money I'd traced. Not all of it had gone to my father's lifestyle. He'd been covering gambling debts as well. How soon can we be in Chicago? I can arrange everything for next week. The quarterly board meeting is scheduled for Thursday. It would be the perfect opportunity. Then that's our target. I stood up, feeling more determined than ever. I need to prepare. I want to understand every aspect of the company before I walk into that boardroom. The next few days were a crash course in Williams Construction's operations. I pored over financial reports, project portfolios, employee records, and client lists. I consulted with my grandfather's advisors, some of whom had been secretly working with him for decades while maintaining positions within the company. I practiced what I would say, how I would present the evidence, how I would handle the inevitable confrontation with my father. And I tried to absorb my new reality, the vast wealth at my disposal. The stunning home that was now mine, the staff that catered to my every need while sharing stories about my grandfather. In quiet moments, I walked the beach that had been his sanctuary, trying to feel his presence, to understand the man who had shaped my life from a distance. On Wednesday evening, the night before the board meeting, I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom, hardly recognizing myself. Gone was the mid-level financial analyst in sensible office wear. In her place stood a woman in a perfectly tailored suit, wearing an emerald pendant that matched her eyes that now held knowledge, purpose, and the unshakable Williams determination I'd inherited from the grandfather I never knew. I'm ready, I told my reflection. And for the first time since this all began, I truly believed it. The Williams Construction headquarters in downtown Chicago looked exactly as it had the last time I'd visited for a family event years earlier. The same stone facade, the same brass lettering above the entrance, the same portrait of my father hanging prominently in the lobby as if he were the founder rather than the usurper. I arrived 20 minutes before the board meeting was scheduled to begin, accompanied by Daniel Hoffman and 2 additional attorneys from his firm. The receptionist did a double-take when she saw me. Miss Williams, we weren't expecting you today. I'm here for the board meeting, Angela, I said smoothly, remembering her name from my preparations. Please don't announce me. I'd like to surprise my father. She hesitated, clearly uncertain about the protocol, but nodded. They're in the main conference room on 12. We took the elevator up, and I used the time to center myself. I was wearing my grandmother's emerald pendant and my grandfather's watch, a vintage Patek Philippe that Mrs. Reynolds had given me before I left Florida. He would want you to wear it today, she'd said. The weight of it on my wrist was comforting, a tangible connection to the man whose legacy I was about to reclaim. The board meeting had already begun when we reached the 12th floor. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see my father at the head of the table, gesturing emphatically about something while the 10 board members listened. Jason sat at his right hand, taking notes. Neither of them noticed as the door opened and I walked in, my legal team behind me. Projected growth in the third quarter should offset any. My father stopped mid-sentence as he registered my presence. His face went from shocked to furious in an instant. Catherine, this is a private meeting. You need to leave immediately. Actually, I have every right to be here, I said, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. As the majority shareholder of Williams Construction, a murmur ran around the table. Jason stood up, his face pale. What are you talking about? Dad is the majority shareholder. I'm afraid that's not accurate, Daniel said, stepping forward and distributing folders to each board member. If you'll refer to the documents before you, you'll see that Thomas Williams maintained controlling interest in this company through a series of shell corporations. Upon his death 3 weeks ago, that interest passed to his heir, Catherine Williams. The board members began flipping through the papers, expressions of confusion and concern spreading across their faces. My father slammed his fist on the table. This is absurd. My father has been dead for years. Another lie, Dad? I asked, moving to stand directly across from him. Like the lies about embezzlement? The falsified invoices? The misappropriation of client funds to cover your gambling debts? His face went white. From the corner of my eye, I saw Jason frantically texting under the table. I don't know what she's talking about, my father said to the room at large. My daughter has been having emotional problems. This is clearly some kind of breakdown. Is it a breakdown to have documentary evidence of fraud? I nodded to Daniel, who distributed a second set of folders. Board members. What you're now looking at is evidence that Richard Williams has been systematically defrauding this company for over 15 years. Bank records showing transfers to offshore accounts, falsified invoices, client overbilling, misappropriation of trust funds. Bernard Harrington, the longest-serving board member, looked up from the documents with a thunderous expression. Richard, what the hell is this? It's a setup, my father shouted, his composure cracking. Catherine has falsified these documents to try to take control of the company. The documents are authentic, I said calmly. As the board's financial advisor, Mr. Harrington, I'm sure you can verify the account numbers and transaction records yourself. Harrington was already pulling out his phone, presumably to do just that. My father turned to Jason. Tell them this is nonsense. Tell them your sister is lying. Jason looked cornered, his eyes darting between our father and the increasingly suspicious board members. I don't know anything about offshore accounts, he stammered unconvincingly. Jason, I said quietly. They have your emails. The ones where you and Dad discussed how to hide the Palm Springs project overcharges. The ones where you suggested using the Henderson account to cover his losses at the Bellagio. My brother's face crumpled. He looked at our father with something like hatred. You said no one would ever find out. You said it was foolproof. Shut up, you idiot, my father hissed, but it was too late. Bernard Harrington stood up. I've seen enough. I move that we temporarily suspend Richard Williams from his duties as CEO pending a full investigation of these allegations. Seconded, said Janet Kramer, another board member. You can't do this, my father shouted. This is my company. Actually, I interjected, as the controlling shareholder. I call for an immediate vote to permanently remove Richard Williams as CEO of Williams Construction, effective immediately. The vote was unanimous, even Jason abstaining rather than supporting our father. As the reality of what was happening sank in, my father seemed to physically shrink before my eyes. Security will escort you from the building, I said, nodding to the guards who had been summoned by Harrington. Your access to all company accounts has already been suspended. As the security guards approached, my father made one last desperate attempt. Catherine, please. You don't understand what you're doing. I'm your father. You disowned me. I reminded him coldly. You threw me out of your house and said I was no longer your daughter. Remember? The security guards took him by the arms. As they led him toward the door, he twisted to look back at me, his face contorted with rage. This isn't over. You think you've won, but you have no idea what you're dealing with. After he was gone, the board meeting continued in a more subdued fashion. I was voted in as interim CEO, pending a formal transition plan. Jason sat silently through it all, looking shell-shocked. When the meeting adjourned, he approached me cautiously. Catherine, Save it, Jason, I cut him off. You knew what he was doing and you helped him. He's our father. What was I supposed to do? The right thing. Like I did. I gathered my papers, avoiding his eyes. Clear out your office. You're on administrative leave pending review of your involvement. You're firing me? I'm your brother. And that's the only reason you're not being escorted out by security right now. I finally looked at him. I haven't decided what to do about you yet. It depends on how cooperative you are with the investigation. He swallowed hard, then nodded. What should I tell Mom? I hadn't thought about my mother since arriving at the office. The truth. For once. All of it. As Jason slunk away, Daniel approached with a satisfied smile. Congratulations, Miss Williams. Your grandfather would be proud. I wasn't sure about that. I'd achieved what he wanted, taking back control of the company, but I felt hollow inside. I'd just destroyed what was left of my family. Justice had been served, but at what cost? As I left the boardroom, I was surprised to find my mother waiting in the reception area, pale and anxious. Catherine, she said, stepping forward hesitantly. Jason called me. Is it true? About your grandfather? Yes, I said simply. He was alive all these years. He died 3 weeks ago. Tears filled her eyes. And he left everything to you? Yes. Richard said. She stopped, seeming to reconsider her words. Richard told me so many things that turned out to be lies. I don't know what to believe anymore. I felt a flicker of sympathy for her. She'd been deceived too, though she'd chosen to look the other way for years. Believe this. Dad has been removed as CEO. There will be a criminal investigation into his financial activities. You might want to consult a lawyer. She nodded numbly. Will you ever forgive me? For not telling you the truth about your grandfather. I didn't have an answer for her. The wounds were too fresh, the betrayal too deep. I don't know, Mom. I need time. As I turned to leave, she called after me. Catherine, be careful. Your father, when he feels cornered, he can be dangerous. Her warning sent a chill down my spine, but I nodded my acknowledgement and continued toward the elevator. I had one more confrontation to face before I returned to Florida. I found my father in the bar of the Four Seasons. Already 3 drinks in, judging by the glasses in front of him. He looked up as I approached, his expression unreadable. Come to gloat? He asked bitterly. No. I came to ask you why. I sat down across from him. Why did you lie about grandfather being dead? Why did you steal from me, from the company? He laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. You want to know why? Because Thomas Williams was going to give everything to you. A child. His 5-year-old granddaughter, who he'd barely met. Everything I had worked for, everything I had helped build. It was his company, I pointed out. His to give to whoever he chose. I was his son, he exploded, slamming his glass down. I worked alongside him for 20 years. But the moment you were born, with Eliza's green eyes and her smile, he couldn't see anyone else. Catherine will inherit everything, he told me. She has the Williams spirit. As if I didn't. So it had been jealousy all along. Jealousy of a child. That didn't give you the right to force him out, to steal from me, to lie to me my entire life, I said quietly. I did what I had to do to protect what was mine. He drained his glass and signaled for another. And now you've taken it all away. Just like he always wanted. His perfect little heiress. I took back what was stolen, I corrected him. There's a difference. Is there? He leaned forward, his eyes bloodshot but calculating. Tell me something, Catherine. How does it feel to destroy your family? To watch your father being escorted out of his own building like a criminal? Did it give you the satisfaction you hoped for? I considered the question seriously. No, I admitted. It didn't feel good at all. But it was necessary. He nodded as if I'd confirmed something for him. You know what your grandfather never understood? What you don't understand. Business isn't about being right or fair. It's about winning. And I was winning until you interfered. Fraud isn't winning, Dad. It's cheating. Such black and white thinking. He shook his head. Your grandfather was the same way. That's why he lost in the end. Did he? I stood up, straightening my jacket. Because from where I'm standing, his plan worked perfectly. The company is back in the hands of someone who will run it with integrity. That seems like winning to me. As I walked away, he called after me. This isn't over, Catherine. You think you're safe in that big house of his? You think you know all his secrets? You have no idea what's coming. I didn't look back. I had a plane waiting to take me home to Florida, to the house my grandfather had prepared for me, to the new life I was only beginning to understand. Whatever threats my father might make, whatever secrets still remained to be discovered, I would face them as a Williams, with integrity, determination, and the strength I'd inherited from the grandfather I never knew. 6 months passed in a blur of activity. From my grandfather's study in the Florida villa, I ran Williams Construction with a dedication that would have made him proud. The company had weathered the scandal of my father's removal remarkably well, thanks in part to my transparency with clients and employees about what had happened and the changes being implemented. My father was facing multiple fraud charges, having been indicted by a grand jury after a thorough investigation by both internal auditors and the FBI. His gambling debts had proved even more extensive than we initially thought, with evidence of millions siphoned from company accounts to cover losses at casinos across the country. He was currently out on bail, awaiting trial, a shadow of the powerful man he had once been. Jason had surprised me by cooperating fully with investigators. While he had been aware of some of our father's fraudulent activities, his involvement had been limited and often under duress. After much consideration, I had allowed him to remain with the company, though relocated to our West Coast office and under strict supervision. It was a second chance I wasn't sure he deserved, but one I hoped he would use wisely. My relationship with my mother was slowly mending. After the initial shock had worn off, she had begun therapy to process the decades of deception she had both endured and participated in. Our weekly phone calls were still awkward, but we were finding our way back to some kind of relationship. She had visited the Florida villa once, walking through the rooms with tears in her eyes, touching my grandfather's belongings and sharing memories of him from before things had gone so wrong. He loved your grandmother more than anything, she had told me during that visit. You remind me of her. Not just your eyes, but your spirit. Thomas always said Eliza had a quiet strength that could move mountains. As for me, I was finally beginning to feel at home in my grandfather's, my villa. Mrs. Reynolds and the staff had become something like family, sharing stories about my grandfather that helped me know him in a way I never had in life. I had established a routine, mornings working in the study, afternoons walking on the beach or swimming in the ocean, evenings reading through my grandfather's extensive library. It was during one such evening that I discovered his personal journals, hidden behind a row of first edition classics in the library. Unlike the journal he had left specifically for me, these were his private thoughts, spanning decades. I hesitated before opening them, feeling like an intruder, but my need to know my grandfather overcame my reservations. The journals revealed a complex man, brilliant in business, devoted to his wife, sometimes distant as a father, and consumed with regret over how things had ended with his son. The earliest entries showed a warm relationship with my father, fishing trips and baseball games, proud notations of accomplishments at school, and early contributions to the business. But as time passed, there were more mentions of disagreements, of my father's impatience and corner-cutting, of his grandfather's concerns about his ethical shortcuts. The entries after my birth showed the shift my father had described, my grandfather's immediate connection to me, his plans for my future, his decision to establish the trust fund that would become such a source of contention. And then the heartbreaking entries after he left Chicago, his self-recrimination for abandoning me, his detailed plans to make amends someday. Most revealing were the entries from the last few years, where he described watching me from afar, his pride in my accomplishments, and his secret attendance at key moments in my life. He had been diagnosed with a heart condition 3 years earlier, but had refused treatments that might have extended his life. The doctors want me to consider a transplant, he had written, but at my age, that would be taking a heart from someone with more life ahead of them. My affairs are in order. Catherine is nearly ready. I need only hold on long enough to ensure she is prepared for what lies ahead. He had known he was dying, but had waited to reveal himself to me until he was sure I was ready to handle my inheritance and the responsibility that came with it. It was a final act of protection and faith in me that brought fresh tears to my eyes. Inspired by his example, I established a scholarship foundation in his name, providing educational opportunities for children from underprivileged backgrounds with an interest in business ethics. I also set up a fund to compensate employees who had been underpaid or had their benefits reduced during my father's tenure, a wrong I was determined to right. One bright autumn morning, I finally visited my grandfather's grave in the small private cemetery on the edge of the estate. I brought white roses, which Mrs. Reynolds had told me were his favorite, and spent an hour sitting beside the simple but elegant headstone, telling him about everything that had happened since I'd taken over the company. I wish I had known you, I said as I prepared to leave. But in some ways, I feel like I do know you. Through your journals, through the company, through this home you built. I'll try to be worthy of your faith in me. As I walked back toward the house, I noticed a man about my age examining the koi pond in the east garden. He looked up as I approached, his smile warm and slightly apologetic. I'm sorry for intruding, he said. Mrs. Reynolds said I could wait here for you. I'm Michael Bennett. My grandfather was Arthur Bennett. The name was familiar from my grandfather's journals. Arthur Bennett had been his closest friend in Florida, one of the few people who knew the whole truth about his past. Catherine Williams, I replied, extending my hand. It's nice to meet you. I know who you are, he said with a smile. Our grandfathers plotted for us to meet for years, but mine respected Thomas's wish to wait until he was gone and you were settled here. I raised an eyebrow. They plotted for us to meet. Michael laughed. Not in an arranged marriage kind of way. Just, they thought we'd get along. We both studied business ethics. We both love sailing. And according to my grandfather, we're both stubborn as mules. Despite everything, I found myself smiling back. Would you like to come in for coffee? You can tell me about your grandfather. About their friendship. I'd like that very much. As we walked toward the house, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The past 6 months had been a journey through betrayal, justice, and healing. I had lost the family I thought I had, but found a legacy I never knew existed. I had uncovered painful truths, but also discovered my own strength. And perhaps most importantly, I had honored my grandfather's faith in me by choosing a path of integrity, even when it was difficult. The company was thriving under ethical leadership. My father would face justice for his crimes. My brother had a chance at redemption. My mother was finding her way back to herself. And I was building a new life, grounded in truth and the values my grandfather had lived by. As Michael and I reached the terrace overlooking the ocean, I touched the emerald pendant at my throat, my connection to a grandmother I never knew and the grandfather who had watched over me from afar. The wounds of betrayal would always be part of my story, but they would not define my future. That was mine to write, with the wisdom and strength I'd inherited from the Williams who had come before me. Asterisk, has your family ever hidden something from you that changed everything when you discovered it? Maybe not a $45 million villa, but a secret that shifted how you saw your entire family? The betrayal I experienced was extreme, but family secrets come in all sizes, and they all hurt when they come to light. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If my journey from being kicked out to finding unexpected justice resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more about how I rebuilt my life and family relationships in the aftermath. And if you know someone struggling with family betrayal who might find comfort in knowing they're not alone, please share this video with them. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as our biggest challenges. Sometimes being forced out of what we thought was home leads us to where we truly belong. Asterisk.